Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. As always, I hope you are doing well. I'm very excited to share this episode with you. I have one of our favorite Ayurveda guests back on the show. Nidhi Pandya is back yet again with another episode, and we get into the details of fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum, but through the Ayurvedic lens. Ayurveda has so much wisdom for these transition phases in a woman's life. And I know Nidhi has been doing a lot of work to make a lot of this visible. So we've been wanting to have this conversation on the podcast. I'm so glad we made it happen this time. We're going to get into the phase of fertility and what Ayurveda says about this phase and practices that you can adopt. We do the same for postpartum. And then we also look at pregnancy. Now, I highly encourage that you listen to this episode, whether you are in some way, if it is of value for you, if you are in any of these phases of life, yes, you will have immediate benefit from it. But even if you are not, okay, I strongly believe knowledge is power, especially as yoga teachers. We will meet people who will need some assistance from us or guidance from us in yoga and Ayurveda in these phases. So Nidhi really simplifies it. She packs so much into this episode in all these phases. And what I enjoy about conversations with Nidhi is I always learn so much, but I learn a lot from all our podcast guests. But I specifically enjoy the ones who simplify it and make it relatable and make it practical and applicable for the times we live in. And Nidhi does that effortlessly. Okay, she uses her generational Ayurvedic wisdom to help us understand all of this. So I have linked to all that she speaks about in this course. Okay, so not in this course, but in this podcast. But I want to highlight one thing before I let you get to today's episode. Nidhi has done a couple of other episodes on our podcast, and I would definitely get you to listen to those right after this, because she talks about moisture a couple of times in this episode, and she has explained that in a previous conversation we've had. So I will make sure to link that in the show notes. So go listen to that, because at the end of the day, Ayurveda is wisdom of life and will help us live more in a wholesome way. Okay. So give this episode a listen and then go listen to Nidhi's previous episodes on the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I have linked everything that she mentions at letstalk.yoga/listen, including her bio, her Instagram handles, and the courses that she mentions. I will see you at the end of the episode, as always. But please remember, this podcast is a free resource. And the only way we've been able to do this for the past 3 years is through your support by leaving us reviews, ratings, sharing it with at least one friend, a yoga friend or somebody who's in any of these phases of life that this could benefit. And if not, sharing this regularly on social media. And that will always help us. Tag Nidhi, tag me, let us know what your biggest takeaways from this one were. And as always, I'll see you on the other side. Hi, Nidhi. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast.
Thank you so much, Arundhati. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, I'm glad you are here. I know we've been trying to make this happen for a while. And to give the listeners a heads up, we're going to be getting into a conversation about fertility. We're going to talk about pregnancy a little bit and postpartum, because I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but there's so much wisdom in Ayurveda for these phases. Some people call them milestones in a woman's life. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but these are significant transition points for many women. So where do we start? Do we want to begin with fertility? Because I meet a lot of couples at the yoga studio, women mainly, who are many times having difficulty wanting to get pregnant. And it feels like, or maybe it's the age I'm in, I've had these conversations with friends who have been struggling with fertility. And so what does Ayurveda have to really say about fertility?
Okay, so Arundhati, right here, what I'm going to kind of clarify for the listeners is that Ayurveda is a lens. Okay, so what Ayurveda really is that it is a lens which allows you to understand everything that's happening in the world. So whether it was happening 5,000 years ago, whether it's happening today, it's like once you've worn glasses, everything looks different, right? So you wear Ayurveda, they are glasses through which you can see like details of the world, like the functionings of things, right? So while there are several textbooks on Ayurvedic practices and prescriptions, I usually first like to use Ayurveda as a lens before I talk about the practices and prescriptions, right? So instead of always going to the Ayurveda, the books and I say, hey, let's you and I both, because we are all, or everybody who's listening to this, right? We are all as human beings gifted with some logic and the ability to connection. So I like to go there first and just use Ayurveda as a lens to begin with. So let's examine the word fertile first, and we use fertile in the context of even just having a fertile land, a fertile land. And in spite of the fact that we are human beings, we sometimes understand the fertility of land better than our own fertility, which means that if you and I honestly, I don't have a green thumb, but let's say I bought a home which had a backyard. I could just, by looking at the state of the backyard, be able to determine whether it's fertile or not. If it was completely dry, barren, cracked, I'm like, nothing's going to grow here. If it was full of mold, I'm like, nothing's going to grow here. But if it was soft and supple and there's like nice, moderate sunlight coming, it's not super cold, I'm like, of course things will grow here. And so intuitively we can understand. And of course, then you kind of go on into, okay, what is the soil good for? What is the fertilizer? How much food it needs? Blah, 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 right? But that first understanding of fertility is so evident. And we also know that even if I was not growing anything in my backyard, I still want it to be fertile. Like, I don't want to look every day in the backyard and see barren land or land which is marshy. I want to look at land that's lush and lovely. And so I want us as women to start thinking about fertility as not just the ability to conceive, but it's a measure of our own health, where we stand. It's our ability to be conducive to more life. And I'm not saying this as a scary thing, but I'm just saying this to say that, listen, fertility was a given back in the day. It was like a rare case. Somebody cannot have a children, cannot have a child, or cannot have children. And today it's the opposite is true. Everybody almost questions their fertility, even before you get in there. I speak to women, and these are women in their early 20s, early 30s, and people are like, even early 20s, right? People are like, I'm not sure. Like, I'm always nervous about whether I can have a child. So it's become that. So the first thing I want to tell you that, listen, there's an intuitive understanding of fertility. There are intuitive markers. There's the way of living that you can cultivate, which will cultivate fertility. And I've seen this time and time again. These are quite foolproof. And the earlier you start living in a certain manner, the better it is. So also the other thing is we've become so clinical about our fertility. We go and we get a whole panel to just determine if we are fertile or not. But really, I'll tell you what fertility is. Fertility is a state in your body where things are flowing, you're digesting well, your hormone cycles are good. There is no excess dryness, just as dry land cannot really reap anything. Similarly, a dry body. So when I say dry body, right, let's just say a body which is just excessively anxious, bloated, dry skin, dry hair, constipation with really, really tight stools. And first, missed periods because the body is so depleted and undernourished, overly worked, overly stressed, so staying up longer, sleeping few hours. Because when you stay up, your solar parts of your body are alive. So the sun kind of dries things up. It
dries you up.
When you're sleeping, so basically, it's a whole lunar to balance between your own inner solar and lunar. How much are you working the body? How much heat are you generating? And how much moisture are you generating? And today we've become completely burned out solar beings. So we've lost that water. In fact, when I was growing up, and I grew up in a large family, Arundhati, an Ayurvedic family, and I had lots and lots of cousins, older than me. And when they were getting married, the brothers and the elders in the family would talk about the prospective arranged marriage bride. One of the words that they would use, and I'm going to say it in Hindi and then I'm going to explain it, was that iske chehre mein pani hai, which means the face has moisture. The eyes have moisture. And, this phrase has been passed down since generations, but what it really means, it's an indicator of her fertility, of her femininity, of her ability to, which was, the way families, I'm not going to get into whether right, wrong, sexes, gender roles, all of that. But basically, that's what families looked for. Hey, you just get married and you reproduce and you procreate and you kind of go on. So that became a very important term in the search for a mate, for a bride. That what is, so when you look at a being who's completely dry and depleted, and we can get into the multiple causes. When I work with people, almost this is what I see. Either people are overly in their solar, are defined as overworking, excess alcohol, excess caffeine, staying up too late, overly stressed, dieting, fasting, avoiding good fats, all of this. And they've done this for a period of time.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, which is not as much the case, they're overly in their lunar, which means they're not using the body as much, which means they're napping in the daytime, they're eating a lot of cold, cheesy foods. They're stagnant, they're withdrawn in their mind and body, both, but they're not addressing everything. So everything is kind of a little bit laid back. But almost always, right? And honestly, our lives were designed, especially if you're from the East, right? And you grew up with the tradition passed on to you. Everything is designed to balance that solar aspect of your body and lunar aspect of your body. So you are warm and you are moist. And if you're warm and moist, which I say is like Florida in March, everything grows there. Like you can just, you just plant a seed and it will grow. Right? And of course, I don't need to answer all the questions at once, but right, of course, there are other aspects. Of course, there are genetic aspects to this fertility. There are, they can be, even though I feel like with the right lifestyle and appropriate time, there is an aspect of, that how your eggs function as you move further into your age. Consuming a lot of birth control and contraceptives, that way, hormonal contraceptives. And just even if you were doing everything to balance your solar and lunar, but if you were not following the circadian clocks, which means rising with the sun and resting with the moon, you're going to disturb your solar and lunar. So that also I see when people do a lot of that, they get irregular periods, which is a sign of like this kind of imbalance. And like, I just want to talk about the period as well. It's a 28-day cycle. What is the moon cycle? It is exactly that 28-day cycle. We're so aligned with the moon. Our lunar aspects are aligned with the lunar aspects of the universe. These are some other reasons why people have this kind of fertility pitfall. And then of course we can talk about solutions and all of that, but I just wanted to give an overview, a perspective of fertility.
No, it's to me, what I've told you this before, what I enjoy about Ayurveda from you is you make it relatable and you bring it into, back then I told you 2023, now 2024. And you simplify it and you make it relatable. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of the world has become so solar, so Pingala dominant in many ways, right? And it was like Rajas and Tamas in its own, in many ways. And you were talking about striking a balance. But most people look at some of these things like rise with the sun, wind down with the moon. It's so simple. I mean, or at least it seems simple, but we complicate it. And I think you just touched upon it. We've given our power away to just others to fix this for us in many ways. And we've lost that touch within. So what would be some of the basic things we could do? I think you already touched upon it, just like fixing your circadian rhythm, checking your stress levels, not working as much. What else? Emotional health, mental health, eating, and you've said this on the podcast many times before, eating fresh food that is doshas friendly.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay. I know you spoke about the eating good fats, and from my own understanding, yes, I get what you're talking about. But also there is this culture of, I've met women, Nidhi, and I say this with kindness and compassion, women who say, I don't want to have a child because I will gain weight. And I'm not judging that, but it's a fear that society and media have put in women, and understanding the evolution of a body through these phases, right? So my question to you is, what would be some of the things that you would say are healthy practices that we can do? Let's start there. Then I will address, I want to talk to you about fertility and vata. Like, do women who have vata imbalance, are they the ones who will struggle a lot more with fertility? But yeah, I'll let you take it.
Yeah. So basically, I'm going to address this like differently. I'm going to give our listeners 5 buckets that you kind of want to address, right? So the circadian rhythm is one bucket. When I say circadian rhythm, yes, you rise with the sun and you sleep not as early as you can at night. So when I say as early, I'm not saying 6 o'clock. I'm saying anytime after 9:30, 10, find yourself in bed. Try and get as many of those hours from 10 to 2, which are really useful hours for your body to go into repair, high lunar phase of the day. So try and get that, whatever you can, whether it's 3.5 hours, right? I understand. I like to be gentle with people because then changes come easy and they're more sustained. But really internalize this. Also think about the animals outside, like the deer doesn't say, today I'm going to sleep a little late, I'm feeling a little lazy. And the tiger doesn't say that, oh, today I'm going to eat in the morning time.
Tiger's not watching Netflix.
Yeah, basically, right? So it's like when you're diurnal, mammals, I mean, for 4.5 billion years, that's how the earth has evolved into this wonderful place. Now we're beginning to question its very existence because we've used our intellect a little too much. So, basically animals are very attuned to this cycle. I mean, they have not done anything otherwise. That's why we've only become, earth so far till 1,000 years ago has only become a better place. And now changing, right? So it's kind of like that. Once you start appreciating that the energies we're not meant to see at nighttime. I mean, we invented electricity and now we suddenly can see at nighttime, so we can think we can do everything, but that's not the case, okay? So just that gentle reminder, that's the first thing I would say. The more we align with that, the clocks of the sun, the more our body rhythms align, our hormones will align. Then I would say when you come to diet, again with diet, I'd say to eat warm foods. When we were primitive, we ate raw foods. What actually allowed us to develop an intellect was the fact that we started cooking our foods. That's what really separates us from monkeys and all our ancestors is, all our primitive ancestors and primitive animals is the fact that we learned how to use fire to cook our foods. So the gut became, smaller, the bacteria changed, and the brain became bigger. And we learn to use our brain differently. So it's exactly what makes us human. So I'll say cook food, keep them fresh. You want to do a salad, do it for daytime, put olive oil, put your lemon juice, vinegar, whatever, support it with a good fat on the side. And lunch heavier because we are diurnal. So lunch heavier, dinner, mini baby meal, right? Of course, keep your food fresh because putting your food in the refrigerator, and I've talked about that, so you can link that episode if you'd like. But keep your foods fresh and good fats. Good fats are our lunar elements, right? Our foods have become very nutrient-based rather than nourishment-based. So if you want, nutrient-based, it means more bitter foods, more pungent foods, more astringent foods. Everything is high nutrient content. So in Ayurveda, we have 6 days. So the last 3 are very nutrient-rich. The first 3, which is sweet tasting, which means complex carbohydrates. And the first 3 support, the last 3 support the first 3, right? So you want your pungent and bitter and astringent, you want your spices, you want all of that, but they are not your primary food. Your primary food are complex foods, complex carbohydrates, sweet potatoes, whole grains, etc., as well as using limited amount of salt and sour foods. They become important in your food. They are the ones that actually build new raw material. We built ourselves on milk. Our cells have the ability to understand how to use milk, which is again a sweet food. In the Ayurvedic terms, as we break taste down, milk is a sweet food. And our body has the memory of how to use that to create new cells, how to create cytoplasm. So, and we're constantly building new cells. And it's a very lunar food. And I'm not saying have milk if I prefer ghee over milk personally, but just all of any lunar foods, whether it's rice, whether it's almonds, whether it's coconuts, it's all of that, right? So including those in your meals, and good fats extremely, like when in doubt, just include good fats and include good fats as much as you can. And when I say good fats, again, I mean like almonds, good ghee, avocados, sweet potatoes, don't go crazy on nuts, but like just include them in your meals. If they cook things in fat, like cook things in whether it's olive oil, whether it's a little bit of sesame oil sometimes in the winter, whether you're traditionally used to eating coconut oil, whether it's, for me, it's ghee that I kind of go back all the time.
Would you call cheese a good fat?
No, cheese is not good.
No. Okay.
Cheese is a yummy
I'm
fat.
asking personally. That's all.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's a yummy fat. I mean, cheese was eaten with wine for a reason, because they neutralize each other. Because the wine would otherwise eat your mucus lining, because the wine wants, it's so astringent
So
and
dry
pungent,
also.
wants
Yeah.
to go and like soak some liquid somewhere. So when you give wine a job to do and you say, hey, you break down my cheese, it's good. So the cheese doesn't get stuck anywhere.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So basically, otherwise cheese is an issue, right? It can clog your system. It's very sticky and slimy, and you don't have good heat in your system. It can't good metabolic fire. So anyways, right? So that's what I would say for diet, right? And ghee, especially for fertility. If you're into ghee, I would say for fertility, that's definitely something that you want to include. You build up use gradually. Always listen to your body as well. Then I would say mental health, because you may do everything lunar. You may be eating the good fats, you may be waking up at time, you may be sleeping on time, and you may be super stressed out about all of this. You're going to be dry. Stress is the most drying thing. I mean, it just literally, when you're, let's say, in an accident, your mouth dries, you get the experience of dryness right away. You don't sleep, you get mouth gets dry, everything very, very drying, right? So if you're overworking, you are burning out, you're over consuming all the fuel that you have, and you're not taking a break to fill gas, you're not pausing, you're not breathing, and the shortness of breath, the shorter your breath is, the quicker, the hastier, the more imbalanced your breath is, the more you are in your lunar. You could have a really busy day outside, but if there is a long breath, there's always awareness of the breath, there's grounding in your system, you can be lunar. So I'd say that taking systematic rest breaks, really planning your contraception. Like I mean, of course, I mean, this is super risky, but I'm going to say it, that if your periods are timely, right? Like I tell you, that for me, my periods have always been 27 days. Like I know already 27th morning. After my second baby, I had for a short time, I would say, and my body had a lot of heat. Not right after, but a few years after she was born, I definitely had, shorter cycles and sometimes longer, maybe 26 days, sometimes 28, 29 days. They've gone back to 27 days, which is a great indicator of like when you have, right? But if you use even one of those apps, right, and the app has a data for 6-8 months, and you're not changing anything drastically about your diet and lifestyle, you can pretty much rely on it. And the app will also take account like Flow. I personally use Flow, FLO. So you don't really, so you want to be careful, at least with hormonal contraception. So, I mean, use a condom that has other issues. The condom has other vata issues, and, we could talk about that in another episode, but otherwise I'd say that you definitely can, be wiser, because using a birth control pill. So the way the birth control pill works is literally by fooling your body that you're pregnant. And that's why you don't ovulate. And then, there's a backup of eggs. It's very important that your hormonal cycles are regular and your body has its correct signaling to your ovaries, where you stand. It's like, otherwise it's a fraudulent system. There's fraud happening in your inner world, in this inner executive functioning. And when there is fraud happening, nothing is going to function well. So literally, it's a way of cheating your body into believing something that's not is birth. So I'm not a big fan of birth control at all. So I think those are the things. And of course, listen, if you have the right partner, and if being a mother is on the cards for you, if that's something that you want to do, I would say sooner rather than later,
Okay.
For sure. I mean, I would love to say, look, my sister had a completely normal, zero high risk, easy conception child at 41 right now, like maybe a couple of years ago. And that's, but I also have to say she was raised very Ayurvedically. So there was nothing, so it was extremely smooth body function. And so everything was very smooth, completely perfect. 9 months, everything hunky-dory. But I've seen the evidence. I've seen, like in my own household where I live, we've been 5 plus 2, 7 women. I mean, 7. This is in my generation. All of us have children, 2 or more. And it's been great for all of us. Because this lifestyle works. And this is all from different gene pools in terms of the mothers, at least. So anyways, right? And like sometimes not even the mothers, like we have sister-in-laws who come in the house who have nothing to do with our gene pool, but they start living this lifestyle and then things kind of work out really well. So this lifestyle does work. And sometimes it's just this basics. There's no like secret sauce that anybody is consuming or following. It's just that. I want to say one last thing because you talked about gaining weight. I do want to say, right, whether you're choosing to have a baby or not, that's a very personal choice. Our bodies are very lunar, right? I mean, so you think about the moon does. The moon creates this gravitational force, like it brings moisture on this earth, right? Gravitational force in the oceans does the same thing for neurotransmitters in our body, keeps us in that kind of liquid, moist state. Even if you're not a believer of lunar, I just wanted to think about how liquid we are as women, how moist we are. Breast milk, amniotic fluid, periods. The egg is also carried in a fluid. We hold the egg in a fluid. I mean, everywhere in the world, eggs are laid in fluids. There's no fluid, you can't lay the egg. It's not going to be protected. So I just want us to think about the fact that, when you get pregnant, firstly, your ovaries get a break in terms of releasing eggs. So extremely important for a woman's life cycle. In fact, like people were menopausing much later, people were healthier, people were not getting so much cancer because your body was getting that large 9 months plus the nursing break. So when you're nursing, you basically, healthy individuals don't ovulate when they're nursing. So you're using all of that lunar in your body then to churn amniotic fluid for 9 months. So your body got this gush, this kind of input of this amazing fluid. Then you have breast milk. So your body's churning that liquid out. So you kind of like reset yourself and become this fluid machine, which you're meant to be. It actually gives you a pause. It actually allows you to reset in the middle of your like youth to kind of come back and like, it's like literally dipping yourself in the Ganges, So you get a chance to have that experience and just moisten everything inside. So, whether gaining weight, and if you do the postpartum Ayurvedically, I'll tell you, I'm still wearing clothes that I wore when I was 23 and I'm 42. And I'm wearing the same jeans, I'm wearing the same tops. And I did both my Ayurvedic postpartums to the T. My grandfather always said, who was an Ayurvedic healer, that if you do postpartum right, you will heal not only from your pregnancy and everything it may have caused, you will heal from all the ailments you've carried for a lifetime if you do it right. I see this with me. I see this with all my sisters. I see this with everybody that I worked with, provided you do the postpartum in that right manner. And I will tell you, people can say, hey, it's genetics, but my mom's side of the family, all her sisters, which is six sisters, they're all obese. So my mom moved into a family where she was able to live Ayurvedically. She did to her body what was different. It was passed on to us. Me and my sister and everybody else in my family has done it differently. And it, knock on wood, we're like blessed with good health so far.
You've said this in an earlier episode, which I will link to. And when I think of you, I think of moisture. Because you changed my thinking, and I know many other people's thinking about hydration versus moisture. And I remember in my studio, somebody was like talking to me about moisture after they heard your previous conversation. So, what about women who choose to be child-free, like me, for example? Right? We are not going through this break. Any suggestions, advice?
So I will tell you, like, Arunati, we all choose our life for different purposes, and it's completely fair. I mean, Buddha lived in a palace for years, and I said, I'm just going to give this all up and I'm going to go. I think for everyone, as long as you choose what your purpose in life is. Look, it does help when you're going on a spiritual / yoga path like you are, Arundhati. You're anyways on a daily basis, probably balancing your lunar and solar in your body.
I'm trying.
Yogi, you don't need to do anything else. Like, if you're yogi in the sense of whether you're yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, even these 4 are in place, then it's only a matter of time before you get to the next 4, right?
Yes.
But if you're living with that yam, niyam, asana, and pranayam, then there's nothing like it. And yet I say, right, you may not be doing that. You may be a lawyer. You may be Warren Buffett, and of course he's not a female, and he drinks Coke as water, but he's created a life purpose for himself, which feels. So I say, if you have a life purpose, and what's the meaning of a life purpose? What's the meaning of dharma? Is a point when you lose sense. You're doing something which makes you lose sense of time and space. You just are lost in what you're doing. You're just immersed in what you're doing. You're stopping to age, by the way. You actually don't experience time in the same way that you experience quicker time when you're stressed. when you're unhappy, when your brain is placed somewhere else, when your thoughts are in the past or in the future, you experience faster time. Like you may have, it may have been only a year, but your body has experienced 6 years worth of time. If you've lost sense of time and space, you slow down aging. No wonder people like Charlie Munger are like, I don't know, maybe he's 99 and he's still so agile in his brain. He's one of the top investors in the world. And he gives you advice on investing. He's so quick, so sharp. And that's what he does. Warren Buffett, who's another huge investor, again in his 90s, who drinks Coke like all the time. His body is not aging the same way that ours is.
Because probably cellularly, their prana is operating differently.
And you don't have the same experience of time. You've lost sense of time. When you lose sense of time, when you lose sense of time and space, your body doesn't have the same aging experience.
Fair.
So if you're concerned about the health aspect of it, I'll say either go find your dharma, figure out what you want to use your life for and figure it out really nicely, or become a yogi.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. That's good advice. So I want to get us to the other two parts, the pregnancy and then mostly postpartum, because I feel like that is the most, it's not looked at enough at all. And it's one of the biggest phases for someone who's just had a baby. But before that, I want to talk about men for a moment.
Yeah.
Because reproductive health also includes them, right? And is there anything from the Ayurvedic lens that, is for men?
Yeah, listen, I'll tell you. So there's a whole section, like you could say there's a whole study, a whole specialization. It's called Vajikarna, which means what is the quality of the seed. So let's think of the woman as the soil, the water, the food, the sun, all of it. But the man is the seed. He provides the seed. And the health of the seed is extremely important. Maybe not to the actual fertility, but to the health of yes, to a certain level, to the fertility, because, if your seed cannot make its way inside, if it's not, the motility is low, what we call the sperm motility is low, then it's not going to swim through, right? And sedentary men usually have a problem with that, overweight, overnourished, sedentary, have a problem with their motility. But the quality of the seed is extremely important. The quality of the seed is going to determine the quality of the offspring. And
I was once in a yoga workshop like 10, 15 years ago at this point. And I remember the yoga teacher saying the quality of the seed, it really depends at that moment of conception. What both partners are dominant in their energies, in their prana, in their mind, in their body, that will determine the kind of child you create. And he was jokingly saying, look at your children. You created that because of the state you were in. And if they're driving you up the wall, it's actually you're responsible for it. And he said it more eloquently. But
beautifully.
And I was like so surprised because to me, that was, I've never heard it before. And yeah, anyway.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And you said it beautifully. It's absolutely true. In fact, if you look at the Ayurvedic Shastras, and this is beautiful, they actually talk about the night of conception. What eats, what the man eats, what is the energy, what is the moon like that day. Of course, you can't always align your ovulation with the moon, but like it actually talks, imagine 5,000 years ago, these texts could say Dwadash Nisha, 12 days after your period. Like this is no ultrasound, no understanding of ovulation like that we have in the modern day, but they had a deeper, more profound and more real understanding. So it said 12th day after your periods, and which side does the woman enter the bed from, which side does the man enter the bed from, which foot do you put first, what kind of everything, what do you consume after intercourse, like it is just to the T, by the way. Beautifully put. And of course, it's there in my fertility course as well. But yeah, so the time of conception as well as the bija or the seed of the man is extremely, extremely important. And there's a whole science, right? I mean, I personally say that if a man and a woman who are reasonably healthy, not undernourished, can go for a panchakarma before they conceive, nothing like it. Excesses from your body will be taken out, and it'll be a gentle place of balance. And of course, adopting a spiritual practice for a few months, even before, or even just doing pranayam. You really you clear the space, you kind of clear the ground, get in the mindset. Already, I say the baby is born in your mind before it actually comes in your womb. So, people are scared to fantasize about a pregnancy. People are scared. But if you really deeply connect with the universe and you have that, it comes from a void. The baby comes from a void. It comes from a longing. But if you have a loving longing without fear, it does support your fertility. It does support those hormones, which will build on that. So the man's health is important, and there's specific herbs, there's specific practices and routines that will support to bring about a good quality seed.
Okay. Thank you. I've been thinking that few sentences he said 15 years ago, I have been thinking about it since then. I'm glad there is stuff in your course to look at. So would it be okay for me to jump to postpartum first?
Jump wherever you want, yeah.
Okay, because reproductive health, I feel like that's spoken about, like pregnancy, not reproductive health. Pregnancy is spoken about so much. So I think there is a lot, and I know very little of Ayurveda. There is a lot in Ayurveda, and postpartum is it's a phase where there's so much going on for a woman, right? So how does one nourish themselves in this new phase where everything has changed in an instant for them?
Okay, so I'm not going to go really into pregnancy, but I'm going to give an insight into what happens in pregnancy, and that's why postpartum. So your body is we're made of 5 elements. Everything in the universe is 5 elements. Anything that has, things are earthy, which means they're solid and they're tangible and they have structure. And then watery, so that's the fluid aspect of things. Fire, it's the metabolic aspect of things. The wind, ability to move, right? So I'm not going to get into the entire details of the 5 elements, but just intuitively, if you understand, when you're actually pregnant, what's building in your body is earth and water, the amniotic fluid, the softness of the belly, tissues, bones. Those are the 2 elements, right? Which are they're all 5 elements are present, because there's DNA, there's mitochondria, all of that. There's all, but basically the abundance of earth and water. And then you basically push out the baby through your vaginal canal, and your body gets into a thing. And when you're pushing out the baby, what happens is there's a force of wind,
Anavayu.
Yeah, exactly. Apanavayu. And that kind of allows you to have those contractions and push the baby downwards. But now what has happened, an orifice in your body has been left open. A canal has opened up a little bit. What happens when any tunnel, if something is sealed and packed, but you make one little hole in it, anytime it can get wind in it, right? Like here I am sitting here in winter New York, and sometimes I feel a draft and I put my hand around my windows and I'm like, oh my God, there's a little draft, there's a little gap. So now the gap has expanded in your, vaginal canal. And suddenly there's also a vacuum that's created inside. There's a void, there's space that's created inside. What happens is that Vata finds its way, wind finds its way. So think about it and the fact that now your body has, instead of shrinking, that you need your uterus to shrink, you need all of that region to come back into shrinking. But now if there's a force of wind that's entering there, it's just going to keep expanding. So a lot of time, so that's one thing, right? So all of Ayurvedic, I'm going to say one more thing. Plus, when it's wind inside and your gut is not supposed to be a cold place, your uterus is not a cold place. It's a nice warm place. Now, suddenly when you have this force of wind going inside, even if it's not cold wind, it's going to kind of disturb, it's going to dry out the lovely warm gastric juices, the Agni. So now you're going to have low metabolic fire. Plus, there's all this wind. No wonder people get postpartum depression, because that subtle wind actually gets into your head as well, creates anxiety, creates stagnation, creates unease. People have painful joints because now the wind has gone, it's like subtle, and it's gone into all of these other joints. So your body becomes extremely vulnerable. After pregnancy, after delivery, your body is vulnerable because a canal has been opened and you need everything to get the uterus back to shrink in its size. So the few things that are needed in postpartum, right? And Ayurvedic postpartum is designed beautifully for all of this, unbelievable. Honestly, Arundhati. So one is getting that wind to move downwards and not get trapped inside. For the uterus to shrink back into size. Something that we call Kleda Vahanam, that there is moisture, excess slime from the amniotic fluid, blood, all of that's pending inside. So you want all of that to be pulled out. I don't know for but the metabolic ability to come back. For the mental peace and calm to stay, for breast milk production, because you're actually nourishing the baby, and so that the mother can start rebuilding good quality tissue for herself. So it's all of this. But the first job is to make sure that that wind force does not damage. Wind is basically what we experience in autumn at the end of life. Wind is what we experience at the end of our life when we dry up, shrivel up, everything becomes, in our bodies. Wind is, excess wind is taking us closer to our own decay. So when we do that, right, so all the Ayurvedic foods and practices for postpartum are done for all of this, whether it is food, which is nourishing, whether it's consuming ginger, and there's a bunch of other list of herbs that you consume to bring up the fire, clean the gunk, as well as shrink the uterus. So basically, that's how the postpartum is designed. And it has practices, everything from belly tying. I mean, that's back in the day, they talked about belly tying so that the wind moves downwards. Like my mom didn't even let me sit with my legs apart slightly when I was, when I was nursing and when I was in the first 40 days, especially. Like I had to sit with my legs really close. We even like cover our ears so that no wind goes from any of the orifices. All of these are orifices in your body. Things can enter, and you don't want subtle wind because your body is very vulnerable. And there's yoni dhupanam. There's a bunch of things. Yoni dhupanam is a steaming of the yoni. It's done traditionally for many, many thousands of years. It's nothing, it's not new. So yeah, all of these things, basically the postpartum protocol, the daily practices, the 40 days. 40 days are important because that's how much time Ayurveda says it takes to get to your deepest tissues. And the same thing in Chinese medicine. You see the same thing in many other. There's a book called The 40 Days, which is about a postpartum book, but I think it's written from a traditional Chinese medicine angle. But all cultures recognize that it takes 40 days to get to your deepest tissues.
Fascinating. As you were talking about the belly tying, I remember my mom used to tell me that her grandmother, my great grandmother, used to tie her belly so tightly. And she was like, it was so uncomfortable. My mom's passed, but now it makes sense because of all that you have been saying. I just assumed it was to bring everything back to, I mean, I know the listeners can't see what I'm doing with my hands, but just draw everything back in. To me, it's fascinating, the 40 days. So because I've heard of the 40-day cycle. So my question to you is, what about, now this is a little beyond postpartum, what about a miscarriage? And how does one take care of themselves? Because I feel like miscarriages are on the rise, the little that I know, right? So how does one nourish themselves after one?
Honestly, I would say if it's anything after 3-4 months, you want to do a mini postpartum protocol. So the entire postpartum protocol is for 40 days. You would at least want to do it for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So you want to do a mini. I've worked with people before, and I've been in that situation where I can, I understand what can happen, but you want to still ignite your agni, even if the orifice has not opened up. But there is stuff, right? So you want to at least eat in that manner. You may not do all the practices, right? But you at least want to nourish yourself. You at least want to include some of the herbs, like ginger, for example, ginger powder. So you want your body and avoiding sour foods, which is extremely important at that point.
Okay. So in pregnancy, right, each woman is different. They have different experiences in pregnancy. But if you could say 3 things that a pregnant woman must do, okay, and you can change that number to whatever you want it to be, what would be your 3 to-go practices or advice for pregnant women?
That
or if you want to take it one in first trimester, second and third, you can do that too.
I think the first trimester, don't be too hard on yourself, because it's a time where your body is just testing its own limits. There's something very new happening. Your body needs a lot of kindness. So people start worrying about, oh my God, am I eating enough for my child? Listen, just do what you need to do to get through the first trimester, especially if you have morning sickness. If you don't have morning sickness, then you use the first trimester to get really mentally prepare yourself for the second trimester. In the second trimester, I would say that starting a reasonable yoga. Look, I also did pranayam every single day in both my pregnancies, alternate nostril breathing, doing a little bit of exercise, but really focusing on not consuming my energy, keeping my mind happy, right? Like every thought changes your blood chemistry, changes your body chemistry. It's the same supply that goes to the baby. So you want the best happening, while the biology is being developed, you want the best chemistry because that's what's actually going to fuel the biology. So like really focus on what brings you joy and fulfillment, feeling whole during that second trimester. And in the second trimester is also a great time to start visualizing, right? Like start actually feeling feelings for qualities that you admire in a human being, So I mean, I personally did biographies. I thought about, like I thought deeply. I wrote about what, just about my feelings, about what I, what I admire in a person, all of that. So the second trimester is a great time. Suddenly everything is lovely and rosy. You're not yet uncomfortable. The pregnancy gets real. So really enjoy it. But I'd say to try and hold on to your life before pregnancy is what you want to stop doing at this point, So I would definitely recommend not over exercising. Doing yoga and pranayama is great. Pregnancy yoga, prenatal. I recommend Iyengar yoga because I found it to be extremely safe and legit for prenatal. So start there, right? You can even swim if you have access to a very clean saltwater pool. A little bit you can swim as well. It helps to keep your back. But really start connect with yourself. How you'll connect with yourself in that trimester and your pregnancy eventually will also go a long way in how you connect with your baby. And then the third trimester is when I say that, and also you always want to be mindful of what you eat. Again, you can follow the circadian rhythms, eat whole foods, eat fresh foods, cut out all your social engagement so you can actually be with yourself. And in the third trimester, you want to start visualizing your delivery and birth. I cannot even tell you how well this works. I mean, it is. So I first tried it with myself 16 years ago when I was pregnant with Suhani. And because the only reason I tried it, Arundhati, because I was at my Iyengar yoga class and my teacher would like put me in like all of these strings and then make me stay there for like 7-8 minutes.
Yeah.
And like first I was just start looking at the time and I'm like, then I realized this is never ending. This is just not going to end. So then something crazy happened to me while doing that Ujjayi. I would go into a trance. While I was doing those exhales and inhales and going to the back, to that pineal gland, I would just go into a little bit of a state, right? It was an endless state. And in that state, just being observing of my breath, I started like visualizing my delivery and my pregnancy and Suhani and her face, just all of it. And then after a few days of this happening, I actually was crystal clear about how this was going to emerge, like to the point of her face. But the things I also told my aunt and my cousin that, listen, I'm going to get into go into labor. My water is going to burst at about 5:30 in the evening. Then I want to eat these two things. I was still obsessed with what I wanted to eat mango. It was mango season in India. That's why I had. And I knew the direction of the room somehow in my mind. Like I had visualized the direction of the room. I had visualized my entire delivery. It was to the T. Like it was not even slightly deviated from that.
Oh, wow.
More recently, I don't know if you know Amina Taha, but she's a famous yoga. She's a yogi from Israel, but she lives in New York. She teaches for Alo Yoga. She's very, very popular. Look her up, Amina. Amina had a baby and she's a great friend of mine. So I had just told her about this. So she did the same thing. And that's exactly what happened to her. Okay. But I worked with my other clients to do that. And it's, to varying degrees, but everybody has had some experience with Wonderful. That. Mm-hmm. So honestly, the third trimester, I would love to tell you, get your glucose tested. Your doctor's already doing all of that. You just focus on you. You focus on connecting, on being whole. Just remain whole. But if you're whole, you'll bring whole to your children.
Beautiful.
Bring a whole person to your child, is what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. And I think it's very grounding, right? Because you have nerves coming up about the delivery and everything after that. So it's beautiful to hear you say that. I'm going to ask you one last question. Okay. Because I know there is so much in your courses that I want you to talk about in a bit. So what about people who go through fertility treatments? Like I have a very good friend of mine. She's gone through IVF many times over, but is finally going to have a baby this week. So what is the protocol any different? Because their body's gone through it's gone through a lot, right? Is the protocol different?
I would just say do the protocol and then eventually go for a panchakarma to India. I would not recommend any place in the US, I'm sorry, but I would recommend that you go to India and go to a center somewhere in the south, which is legit, look at the ratings, talk to the doctor on the phone, get your comfort, and then go for Panchkarma at some point in your life. It's hard with a young baby, but it can also be a vacation with a young baby. And for anybody who's listening, you can also get some help while you're there. You know, like take your partner, take somebody, and hire some help as well. But this is what I would recommend. And it doesn't have to be like in the first year. It doesn't have to be the first 5 years. It doesn't have to be in the first 7 years also. But at some point in the next 10 years, you want to go, because there's a lot of inflammation when you've gotten that treatment. There's also some backlog, and then you want to work to lower all of that.
Fair. Nidhi, this is wonderful talking to you. I'm always excited to talk to you. I feel like I learned so much. Now I know you have 3 master classes, or is it 1 master class where all of this is? I want you to tell the listeners where they can go get their hands on this.
So there's 4 master classes. So it's everything from fertility is 1, pregnancy is the 2nd, postpartum, and then there's also childcare. So it's the whole bundle. You can buy 1, you can buy 2, you can buy all. Of course, it's I think the way it's priced that it's cheaper to buy all. But basically, so there's 4 classes, 1 dedicated to each of the phases.
And where can they find that?
Oh, I can send the website, and they can, in the process of redesigning my website. So eventually it's going to be nidhi.me, but we have another website, courses with nidhipandya.com, but I will send it to you.
Perfect. I will make sure that everything is linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. As always, it was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Arundhati.
Thank you for listening. I will see you next week with another guest. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.